Good morning, everyone. My name is John Mensah, and this week I'll be presenting on human trafficking in relations to the Super Bowl or big events. But more importantly, I'll be focusing in on Minneapolis and on Super Bowl 52. There are two types of human trafficking. There's labor trafficking and then there is sex trafficking. And labor trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, debt, bondage, or slavery. And then sex trafficking is an act in which commercial sex is introduced by force, fraud, coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such act has not attained the age of 18. And it is important to note that under federal regulations, a victim of sex trafficking that is under the age of 18 does not have to be forced in order for that individual to be a victim. So the fact that the person is under 18 years old automatically qualifies the individual to be a victim. Just some backstory on sex trafficking in relations to Super Bowls and big games. So in 1993, a coalition of feminist activists held a press conference to announce an alarming discovery, and the discovery was that the biggest sports day of the year was also the biggest day of the year for women, violence against women. This claim caught on quickly, perhaps because it seems to make intuitive sense at the moment when domestic violence was coming to be seen as a national crisis. In terms of correlating the big game or the Super Bowl and sex trafficking, this is not to say that the big game is the reason why we have all these sex trafficking issues. No, but what it's saying is that on the day of Super Bowl or any other big game, there is a spike in the number of people that are sex trafficked. And this is based on the number of the number of sex ads that are placed on sites such as Backpage and Craigslist. So just going off of those numbers, there's a spike on the weekend of a football game or the weekend of an all-star game, where we see a spike in the number of people that are putting up ads on these sites. The announcement of human trafficking being a big issue on big game days set groups such as In Our Backyard and along with other groups into action. And In Our Backyard is a national organization that fights against trafficking of women and children. And they primarily focus on Super Bowl because of the large part it plays in human trafficking each year. And this presentation will shed light on the work done by the organization and the effectiveness of their work. Why is this case important? So in order to get human trafficking under control, we need to make the topic more sensitive again and make people aware of its dangers, and because we have grown to become desensitized to what sex trafficking is. And when you normally ask somebody about sex trafficking, their normal response will be, well, it's none of my business. What people do on their time is on their time. But I think we need to bring back how severe and how dangerous it is to our community. We could start with our pop culture. TV shows like Pimp My Ride. That's the word pimp glamorizes what human trafficking is. TV shows or movies like Pretty Woman glamorizes prostitution. And then you have our popular music or pop music, which glorifies this type of behavior. So issues faced in this case. So the hard thing about this type of case is that no one is walking around, or no sex traffic victim is walking around with a sign on their forehead saying that I'm being sex trafficked. So one of the biggest issues was, how do we fight human trafficking during such a big event? And one of the ways that they were able to tackle that was to use volunteers and to train these volunteers to recognize that there's a problem how to recognize sex traffickers and how to take action. They're also trying to figure out how to reduce victim arrest and also the services that are available to provide to these victims. Backpage and Craigslist, I believe, was one of the biggest issues that these types of organizations faced, because these websites were platforms for human traffickers to advertise and to sell their commodities. So fighting that was going to be tough, but they figured out a way to do it. Minneapolis, along with groups such as In Our Backyard, collaborated with law enforcement, nonprofit, and faith-based community organizations to work together to coordinate efforts. Believe it or not, Minneapolis used a simple incident command system because of the system's flexibility to adapt to the combating of sex trafficking in a big event such as the Super Bowl. So their goal was to prevent, protect, and prosecute through enhancing law enforcement's ability to identify and rescue victims and ensure that comprehensive services are available for victims of trafficking. So they had a bunch of different teams, and some of the teams were victim services team, a law enforcement team, awareness and outreach, training, protocol, and obviously the individual groups. And in our case, In Our Backyard was our core committee. So what was done well in this case? What the group did was they compiled a book or a list of individuals, children who have been missing, and they compiled it into a book and distributed the book during a big game. In the end, 15 of those missing children who were in a book, whose pictures were in the books, were found, and 94 sex traffickers were arrested. Minneapolis also capitalized on some of the anti-demand campaigns that were going on at the time, and also one of the biggest ones was called Don't Buy the Lie. Along with the amazing work done by all the different organizations across America, it brought about the legislative changes, and as you can see, there has been a crackdown on websites like Backpage and Craigslist. These pages no longer have their personnel page where sex traffickers use to advertise what they were selling at a specific time. Anti-demand campaigns were critical in deterring Johns from soliciting prostitutes when they were aware that they could face either societal or criminal consequences. We also learned that the strengthening and enforcing of criminal penalties and civil sanctions also served as a deterrent factor in discouraging Johns, which included paying a large fine, forfeiting their cars, whatever car they drove to engage in these activities, they potentially were going to forfeit it if they were caught, and also felony penalties, and also listed as child sex offenders. The city has, based on what they've learned, have grown to have a different approach in handling sex trafficking, and they are now handling it as a human crisis and a social justice issue. Needless to say that Super Bowl is not the only event that has a connection with sex trafficking. Any big major event, whether it be sports or car show, like whatever kind of big event that brings in a lot of people to a specific place, has the potential of having sex trafficking involved in some way, shape, or form. One of the ones that I could think of off the top of my head was an All-Star Weekend or the CIAA basketball tournaments. And in 2017 alone, in North Carolina, had about 221 reported cases of sex trafficking, while South Carolina, where the CIAA basketball tournament was being held, saw 118 reported cases. The crazy thing is that anybody can be a human trafficker and anybody can be a victim. There is no specific face for any of these entities. Human trafficking is the second largest crime worldwide, and during this year's Super Bowl alone, the one in Atlanta, 33 people were arrested for sex trafficking over the 4-day period. Again, sex trafficking is a big time business for some people and also a problem that we as Americans and as community members need to find ways to eliminate it from our community. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.